Matt Tamura, who do you reckon the happiest person in Australian rugby is at the moment, off the back of 4 Super Rugby rounds?
Could be Philip Waugh, probably wouldn't be, although he's a bit busy trying to find a coach. I don't know if he's got too much time. But I tell you what a ripper weekend. I was hoping so bad the Reds won, because that would have just been no Kiwi teams win. After all we've taken, that would have been brilliant.
I think that would have been the first time since perhaps 2000, and an Aussie side didn't go particularly great in 2000 from memory. Brumbies were going pretty well until the Crusaders stepped up and took it from them. No, the happiest person I reckon in Australian rugby at the moment is Dan McKellar. 3-0. The Waratahs, for the first time since 2009, unbeaten in their first 3 games.
Yeah, and building a really solid base. Obviously the star signing hasn't been there. I thought there's some interesting selections on the weekend too, which we kind of alluded to last week in terms of finding, who fits the playing mold of his style a bit more. But mate, yeah, you're right. He would be stoked. He's not one to smile too often. He usually just shows his frustration, but I think he'll understand that they're building something good.
Well, in a Tars Reds week, he was quite playful in his post-match press conference when he said, when he was asked, you're going to have to go up another level ahead of a clash with the Reds next week. And he said, yeah, 100%. The Reds are the best in the comp. And it raised a few eyebrows. And then I actually came back to it 5 minutes later because no one asked the follow-up question at the time, going, hang on a moment, did you actually say that? And he said later on, yeah, I did say that. If you rewind the copy, you'll hear that. The Reds are the best team. And then I said, really, is that you just being playful, taking the first shot? And he said, you can interpret that how you want, Christy. And I thought that was amusing, and it's typical kind of Dan McKellar. Likes to stir it up. Used to do it a lot with the Brumbies and the Tars.
Yeah, and it's a very Brumby way of approaching it in terms of the underdog, the smaller brother, the chip on your shoulder. They think they're the best team. It's very much what we did down here for a lot of Tar Week games. And it seems like he's trying to reverse it a little bit, because I can assure you Kissy will be doing the exact same thing that those rich boys from the North Shore, living in Manly, whatever. So there'll be a bit of that going on. But, it's always an interesting one when everyone tries to claim underdog tag nice and quickly. I always find that an interesting insight into Aussie psyche. But it'll be good. It'll be a good game. And yeah, a few of them have been a bit lopsided recently, but I think this one could be a ripper.
Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about that Aussie psyche in a second. But they weren't the only ones, the Tars, to really kind of get their season underway. The Brumbies, your old side, what are we in 21-20 over the Blues? The first time in 12 years that the Brumbies go to Eden Park to beat the Blues. And the Stephen Larkin reminded people they do it in 12s. They do it in 9 years, in 2001, 13 and 2025. Incredible to think he's been a part of all of that, right? Right along the way, from a player in 2001 to an assistant in 2013. You would have been there that day.
Yeah, I was there that day. Very, very wet. Kind of suited the way we played back and then. We were very kick-focused with Jesse Mogg out the back, Nick and myself in the halves. But the way they did it was unreal, and I got a bit nervous. A couple of tries just before half-time. I thought, here we go. The Blues looked like they started breaking tackles quite easily, but awesome! I was pumped, and I'm in Canberra. I was working the next day in the cafe, and that many people coming up to me, cheering the win, which was it was really, really cool, real special.
A lot's happening in Aussie rugby, including the Wallabies coach. It's pretty soon. It's less than 2 weeks away, from my understanding, before an appointment is made. Whether or not an announcement comes moments later, I think it would. It's the sort of thing that doesn't stay quiet and kept secret for too long. So more on that in a moment. But tell you what, if you're Stephen Larkham, if you're Dan McKellar, you'd be thinking, I should be in the mixer at the moment. I'm not sure if they are. We'll talk about that in a second. There's so much going on around the world of rugby at the moment, including the Six Nations, which is heated up, and the pointy end of the season following 4 rounds. So lots to talk about, a lot more on the other side. I'm Christy Doran with Matt Tamura. Before we kind of dig into Super Rugby, I want to talk a little bit about the Six Nations because, as we all know, the Lions is not far away. And if you're Joe Schmidt, are you watching it live at 1:30 in the morning, an Ireland-France blockbuster at the Aviva?
You'd have to. They're two of the top, 4 teams in the world, really, and such contrasting styles. That's why I really like watching those two play. I don't know about you. So many teams are so similar with their shapes. That pod system out the back, all that stuff. But the French just do it so differently. Their halfback is clearly their playmaker, and just the way they. That crossfield kick from near their ring, just stupid stuff like that. It's just they're so entertaining. I don't know about you, but they're one of my favorite teams to watch.
By a long, long way. It was an incredible game of rugby, and if you didn't see it, I strongly encourage you to watch it because it had everything, I think. And from Ireland out, they just battered the French kind of line for the opening 10 minutes, had all the territory, and they didn't come away with points. And it was a bit of a lesson there around how do you accumulate early pressure, scoreboard pressure. And France actually managed to kind of take the ascendancy before Ireland made a little bit of a comeback either side of half time. You're right about that crossfield kick. That is bonkers. And do not try that at home or on your Saturday morning rugby if you're a youngster or a little bit older. It was more audacious than what Quade Cooper used to do to Rocket Rod Davies, wasn't it? It was ballsy there from the winger. And
different scale as well. Like we're talking, this is pretty much the decider of the Six Nations. That's good God.
Lewis Birri, I've totally stuffed up the pronunciation of that French left winger, but he was unbelievable and rightly deserved player of the match there. 2 tries, both of them great finishes, particularly the second one. And as if that's just French rugby to a T, isn't it? The colour, the audaciousness, the desire to take the game on, and from Ramos with the little grubber, regathering the ball from the good skill set from the big guys in the middle like Manny Mafu, who managed to get the ball out the back, and then Damien Penaud opens it up. It was a try from the gods.
Oh, yeah, it's poetry, it's art, isn't it? I know they got a French saying where they genuinely believe that only the French can see the game in a certain way, and you'd argue that it's not the most consistent way, let's be honest, but geez, when it works, it is just it's beautiful. And now I've got nervous to say his name, Birri, whatever his name is. Oh, I said it before.
That was raising.
I know, yeah, but God, he's got a bit of Cheslin about him, doesn't he? Like, obviously not as physical as Cheslin's pretty physical considering, but the stature, the evasiveness, the headgear, it's we should be looking for that. We should be, maybe Matt Greeley. Who do you reckon could be our version of it? I don't know, someone with a headgear. Give Toole a headgear.
Yeah, if you give Toole headgear, that's he'd be it. I don't know how he'd look with headgear on, to be honest, but Matt Greeley, probably a few similarities with the guys that you mentioned beforehand. He started the season pretty well, and I think he was solid enough for the Force in their poor result against the Tars. But if we stick with that clash for a moment, it was pretty obvious that the power game really shook the Irish. Like the 7-1, the audacious nature to name a 7-1 bench, then the catastrophe of losing Antoine Dupont. It was interesting that in the post game, Gregory Aldred spoke about the fact that at half time there was fire in the bellies. They came out with a bee in their bonnet, and you could see that. They might have conceded an early try, but the back row was just unbelievable. Like the crosses of the world, the Geelongs coming off the bench, they played like men possessed a lot of that time, and the drive, the hits. And I had Bernard Jackman text me this morning, actually, the great and the former Irish international turned great pundit, said that a couple of people that he's spoken to have spoken about the fact that it was a hammer to the nail in terms of how they played, that just the sheer physicality that they displayed right throughout the game was something else, and the Irish in the end couldn't handle it.
Yeah, being the bonnet's probably the most underrated statement in terms of downplaying it. They were on one, and like I say, typically not the half of rugby that you typically expect the French to come out early first half and lose their minds, but it was just so French. It was so dramatic. It was theatre. It was the ups and downs of losing the best player in the world in my view. And having a 7-1, and old mate comes on, and he was incredible. They didn't change the way they played as well. It's not like they were shifting a lot more. He was still playmaking. I love the way they innovate around their box kicks of all exciting things. Just how flat they do it on their exits.
It's a real, isn't it, to get some of that length?
It's just, and it's a crossways. It was such a good game, and it was such a you flip that to the poor fella, didn't have the best game at fly half for the Irish, but it was such a good game. I tell you what, the entertainment value of rugby at the moment is pretty bloody good. There's not too much wrong with our game. I think we're hitting a nice little sweet spot recently, and it's good.
So I know that a lot of people have been thinking about this over the weekend. What does that mean from a Lions perspective? And certainly from looking at it from an Australian lens, what does it mean from a Wallabies perspective? How might Joe Schmidt feel? Is he rubbing his hands going, you know what, I feel more confident having seen what the best of Ireland can do? And without a Johnny Sexton, with Owen Farrell, who's been pretty injury-plagued in recent months, who's going to be bossing it for the Irish? The British and Irish Lions, rather. Who's going to be bossing it? And who do you think's more nervous at the moment? An Andy Farrell, who's going, I've got a bit of a selection and conundrum here about who to turn to without a real clear-cut number 10, perhaps. Lots of selection discussions. The Irish just getting well beaten. Clearly, Gats in 2013-17 was very Welsh-heavy. I reckon Australia might be thinking, hang on, we're stuck with the Irish the last couple of times that we've played them. We just beat England. We must be feeling quite confident. Who's more nervous at the moment, Farrell or Schmidt?
Yeah, well, I think Schmidt's got far less to lose. Actually, that's a lie. It's a home Lions tour. But in terms of, he's come in as doing a little bit of a rescue job. He's leaving. He'll have a crack, won't he? And I think the pressure's very much on Andy Farrell in terms of expectation. But I think he'll back himself in the sense that Ireland didn't look as good as they have, and the big obviously Johnny Sexton not being there, but they've played exceptional since he's left as well. It's the fact that Farrell's not coaching, that he's got a bit of a diminished role, and I think that has a little bit of an effect. And I think part of him will understand that. It's good. It's great for us. Putting some seeds of doubt for me. It's just how do you get a pack that can strike fear into, you have to have a Will Skelton there, don't you? You've got to have these guys that you're looking up 2-3 times, hoping that they're not the ones that are going to hit you. And we have the beginnings of it. And we've got some good guys, but I think we need some genuine world-class guys in there as well. Yeah,
I'm with you there. I think striking fear is the big one, because I remember people used to say about Dan Vickerman that he just hit so hard, really dented the line. Like, how many players do you have that really do that in Australian rugby? And some of them might be getting to that point, but really, I think the biggest one is a Skelton, and perhaps the other biggest one in the back row. Well, Rob Valetini's been out injured for a while, but I'm not saying that Sean McMahon's in the reckoning right now, but he's the sort of player that just strikes some fear into players.
Yeah, so do you just some brawlers, really, turning it into a bit of a street fight. That Waratahs team that won in, I think it was 14. It was Skelton, funny enough, but you had Cliffy, you had Hooper, you had Kane Douglas, you had Potgieter, you had Tatafu, you had Kepu. that was a scary team to attack the ball into. You'd be worried about Taft going at your ankles. You'd be worried about Hoops getting on the ball and Cliffy. It just and just somehow getting that, because that psychological stuff does play a factor. Maybe not right at the start of the game, but towards the end when you're a bit tired, you're a bit fatigued. Your tolerance levels come down a bit and all this kind of stuff. I think the French might have shown a way to do that in a sense.
I reckon one play that really caught my eye, we'll move to Super Rugby now, and England too good for Italy, by the way, and Scotland held on against Wales, who finished, and that was actually an amazing second half. And the game itself, high scoring, but drama. There was a big decision in the end to cancel out a try about 7-8 minutes to go, which really would have set up a cliffhanger with 5 to go. But I was super impressed by a former Rebel who you might have actually, I'm not sure if there was a crossover, but came off the bench for Langy Gleeson, and he's a young guy, Levi Talatayana, the big back rower, 196 centimetres, 112 kilos, junior Wallaby, spent a bit of time out injured last year. And looking at him and being at the game on Saturday night with the Force and the Tars, he was someone that I saw and I was like, physically, like, this guy is massive. He's a big dude, and it's way too early to say he's going to be a Wallaby in July, but he's the sort of player that I can see in the same way that Langy Gleeson came from a bit of the clouds in 2022 to play for the Wallabies. He's the sort of guy that I can see make a real impact for this Tars team going forward in 2025 and have that edge that's probably been missing from that Tars pack for a long time.
Yeah, and he actually went to my high school a few years after me. I think he went from the Reds, he went down to Rebels, and then now over to the Waratahs. But that was like characteristic of their whole game on the weekend. I was thinking about it. Watched it live, but then just caught up on some highlights just before, and they broke their spirits, didn't they? They just broke their spirits. The thing that stood out for me was their two-man tackles, like real kind of rugby league. You saw Kidwell doing it with Czech in Argentina, where the second man, rather than just throwing them to deck or whatever, is just being a nuisance, and they just broke them by the end. By midway through that second half, the Force were shattered physically, mentally, and I think they looked. I don't know about you, but they looked a little flat anyway from the start, and then just the way that the Tars just didn't give them anything, and were just brutal in defence. It's clearly going to be a characteristic that Dan wants in his team, and they've definitely started well.
The hard edge, it was impressive to see. And I agree, the first 30, 40 minutes I actually thought was really physical. I know that there weren't many points in that first half an hour, a couple of late tries for the Tars in the first half, but the first 25, 30 minutes, the Force had a lot of ball and they only came away with one try, and they were made to work for that one with Carlo Tizzano going in tired off the back of a good carry from Darcy Swain. But Nick Champion he carried the ball with a lot of sting and vengeance, and he kept on just being hit harder. And Will Harris similarly as well. The two look quite similar now when they're in the same back row. But I agree. I think that kind of broke them, and then they looked lost with answers in the second half. They were going to the corners a little bit too much, getting shown the line, and then being forced into touch. And that was like, what's going on here with the decision or with the playmakers about not going straight enough? And clearly when you've got scrum issues as well, that takes a lot out of your front row, but it also takes a lot, it saps you mentally too.
Yeah, like I said, I wish I had a better term for it or whatever, but it just felt like they broke their spirit, like it really did. They were good at the start, but they're professional rugby players. They are, and they're a good team, the Force. So you're not going to break them early, but midway through that second half, you just got a sense of that momentum, the carries, those two-man tackles, those shots in the ribs, the long breakdowns. It just felt like it was starting to wear on them a bit and frustrate them and ultimately just fatigue them. And fair play, because they're often not things that you get rewarded for or get noticed. But I can assure you, Dan McKell will be showing them good clips of them doing it well, and really, kind of setting the tone.
34-10 in the end to the Tars. 2 tries to Max Jorgensen. I thought that was we've been waiting for Jorgo to be able to string matches together, and it's probably been because he's been a little bit injury plagued, so young, obviously, and it's difficult to kind of continue to back up the deeper seasons go. But off the back of a pre-season, he's definitely bigger, and we just saw that what Jorgo can do, and I think without having Swali there, well, like he took a lot of the headlines for the previous 5-6 months, but he's now with Swali just grounded for a couple of weeks. Jorgo's stepped up, and to me, he's a starting Wallaby at the moment on the wing. Look, his ability to find the line is very impressive in Australian rugby.
Yeah, I think he's been exceptional as well. And look, I didn't not being in Sydney around the time he was in high school, I didn't understand the hype and all that. Got back, and then you see a young guy or whatever, but he has been so impressive, so impressive. Just his feel of the game, he's clearly quite he's a hard worker. You can tell he's got a bit of. It seems like his head's on his shoulders a little bit as well. Like he seems like quite a calm guy, humble in that, and super excited for him. Got some genuine gas, but he seems like he could slot into 15 quite comfortably as well. And and probably what I alluded to earlier was the selection of Crichton at 10. Just his execution of those, like you see they're doing a lot of these like crash second phase and the open field cross field kick, the contestable kick. Very English in that way. Aussies, we don't usually do that. We usually go over the forwards, but his execution of it, like he very much was executing the game plan, I feel, a lot better than Tane had in the past. And I do rate Tane. I really enjoy the way he plays. But in terms of the game model that Dan's trying to play, clearly quite structured, physical based, good kicking game. You just get that feeling that it might be a bit difficult for Tane to get a lot of game time there.
Yeah, I think the decision was made easier for Dan last week to start Lawson because Tane was sick to begin the week. But I agree with you. I think he's going to have another week in the 10 jersey, and why not? He didn't bring his kicking boots from a place kicking perspective. But, not easy when you got 3 sideline efforts to begin with either. But yeah, he knows the Reds well. He's got a good long pass about him. He's pretty tough physically as well. So good signs for the Tars. They've been. You don't win competitions, do you, in February or at the start of March? You've got to keep getting better incrementally. And Angus Bell continues to get the job done. Dave Parecki was tough. His response off the back of missing last year has been outstanding. And even Ben Grant, I think, was tough and abrasive and big guy. So good signs for the Tars. Because they're playing the Reds next week and on Saturday night in Suncorp, and I've been told the weather's going to be getting better and Suncorp's going to be fine, and even Ballymore, with the exception of a bit of debris, has been okay as well, despite the aborted kind of cyclone Alfred, but a lot of rain that's hit the east coast of Australia. And the Reds on Sunday, great to see Sunday afternoon footy to begin with, but far out. Like Les Kiss would have known it was always going to be a difficult proposition when you lost your 10, 12, 13 and 15, but they never really looked like they were in that, and they kind of looks like they were playing touch footy at one point in time.
Yeah, they were pretty poor, I thought. And we were talking about before, that shape, that tripod shape. The amount of times that the Reds played out the back to a playmaker, and the Crusaders just shot out, put them under pressure and caused an error. I think there would have been maybe 2 tries. That last one, Al Moore's try, was just, it summed it up, as the commentator said. Like it just, and their decision-making things, like the Reds have scored some amazing tries against Crusaders over there in the past few years, and maybe the younger decision makers got a bit lured by that, got a bit romantic about the idea of scoring some really good tries, and sure they still did, but yeah, the Crusaders are always a good team, and playing those short door options, breaking through early days, I think would have been a far better option. And yeah, they didn't really react to it well. And you even heard Kissy talk about it on his halftime speech about earning the right to go wide, go through first. And for me, that's kind of the practical application of that, was when you're in those shapes, don't hit the playmaker out the back when they're rushing. Like, just hit that short runner, carry, go the next phase. And yeah, just a bit of maybe just some, younger decision makers who'll be better for it. But yeah, difficult night, I think.
Yeah, you wouldn't write them off this year at all. That's one game early on in the season. And, there were some positives. Jeffrey Smunga-Allen was great off the bench when he came on, and guys like Ryan Smith, Josh Canham, Alex Hodgman, they had some really bright moments as well. Harry Wilson was everywhere, 20 carries, 20 tackles, a fair effort from the Reds, number 8. They'll get back, I think, Tom Liner. Interesting that I think he did pull out earlier in the week last year with that recurring kind of niggle that he's been plagued with by the last year or two since he kind of came into professional rugby. And no one's really been able to get to the bottom of what it necessarily is, but that would frustrate you. But fortunately, he's going to be coming back, I think, on Saturday. Hunter Paisami's back as well at 12, and that's a massive win to have his brutal kind of nature of going through the middle. He doesn't shirk the confrontation at all and likes to take it to the opposition. Yeah,
it'll be very interesting seeing the centres kind of come at each other this weekend. I think that'll be a really good. There'll be matchups all across the park, but yeah. Are you alluding to Tom Liner's head, or is that what you're?
Well, he originally had a head knock. Obviously, he missed the second half against the Force. I think he's had these kind of battled these, whether it be hamstring or little knocks, in the body, like leg injuries, where people have gone, well, is it groin? What is it? Is it hammy? And they haven't been able to diagnose there being anything significant there, but the player not thinking he's 100%. So clearly Tom Liner is a very capable player, and the Reds will be desperate to have him back there, because when he's on the field, he's quality, and his sense of the game, we're talking about the game, understanding about it beforehand, he's a guy who does read the game very well and has a great understanding.
Yeah, definitely. And he would have picked that on the weekend. And I don't mean to, criticise too heavily the playmakers there. They'll be much better for it. But you had some guys that were really willing, wanting to play and playing some good footy. But just, as you say, decision making, being a bit more pragmatic about what works away from home, particularly against a strong Crusaders team whose line speed is exceptional, and you can't really go around that line speed. You're very much going to go through it first. So, but that Reds team looks significantly different when you start adding guys like Liner, Hunter, and Jock eventually, and all these kind of guys. That back line starts to look like the Reds that we kind of got excited about earlier in the year, and I'm sure we will have reason to later in the year too.
Yeah, definitely. Josh Fluke, I think, is out for a reasonably significant time with the hammy, I think it is. And Jock Campbell will be back sooner, probably a couple of weeks away still, though. But not great timing for them. Mason Gordon's and others had concussion. It was a pretty severe one. I think it was a double knock that he took at training. So never good. And he's kind of
is that Isaac Henry? Is he still there? Because I really rated him.
Yeah. And I think he's another that's a couple of weeks away. And if you can bring him, Danguna, we know how great he's been for the Reds recently, and obviously the Rebels last year as well. So fingers crossed their injury toll on the back line eases up in the days and weeks to come. So 43-19, the Crusaders were winners there. From an Australian perspective, the Brumbies, we touched on it right off the top, but going over there to win. Yeah, you used the word pragmatism. That was a pragmatic performance, that second half particularly. We were talking about it when we were messaging each other on the Friday night, but I reckon there was 6 contestable kicks that the Blues dropped in that second half. Their line-out started to malfunction. Clearly, the Brumbies got the better of the scrum in the dying stages as well when they dominated the breakdown in the last 20. That's how you finish a game. The bench impact was just elite, wasn't it, from the Brumbies to get there and allow off the back of the scrum. Caden Neville comes on in the 78th minute just for a scrum like that to inject 20 kilos. Nick Frost would have been gassed after 78 minutes, and they win a scrum penalty there. That's coach management and reading the feel and knowing what a big second rower can do behind a prop.
Oh, definitely. And another young half pairing, but they were amazing. I thought both, like Declan, he had one of his, he had his best game by far, and to do it in those like trying conditions, any game at Eden Park, I don't know if I've ever played well there. He is, like fair play to him. I think that'll give him a lot of confidence going forward, and he'll be hard to get out of the 22 now, I think, when Noah does eventually come back, because he's shown a lot of promise. And, I was super impressed by them.
Yeah,
Sorry?
It was a pretty I used the word just then, complete performance. I think there was just so many players that stood up then. I think it was Alan Alisol's best game for a long time, scrummed well, in tight, scored the try, but lots of carries, lots of rucks. The 2 hookers were quality. Slips was very busy around the park as well.
Yeah.
The back row was outstanding with Rory Scott. Tom Hooper was brilliant. Isn't he going to be a player in a couple of years' time? I know he's been lost to Exeter at the end of the season, but he'll come back a very good player. Charlie Cable was great. Corey Toole defensively stood up. I thought some big shots on AJ Lamb and Mark Talia. David Fellaway, one of your guys that you particularly like, was straight and direct as well. Tom Wright's decision-making was good, and that right-to-left pass was spot on. So it was Blake Shop off the bench. Ryan Lonergan kicked the goal. Luke Reimer with the breakdown. That's how you win games of footy, right? When you have 23 guys playing pretty well.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And I think by complete, you mean everyone played their role. Like, it was just everyone had something to add. So it's quite hard to go, this bloke was incredible, and this, like, everyone was just really good, and the coaching was smart. Like the addition to go to those contestable kicks, and really just kind of, they very much targeted the new fly up. Was it Plummer? I think it was Plummer after. We should probably, like, obviously Bowden going off was a huge thing, because it had that feel of old Bowden Barrett, making these breaks for fun and missing his goal kicks. Like, it just felt like the old Bowden Barrett, and you're like, he'll miss a goal kick, but he'll score 2 tries, and he'll just do Bowden things. But that going off definitely changed a little bit of the momentum. But really, like, targeting certain guys in the backfield, getting those high kicks up there. Super impressive. And I agree with Toole defensively. Like, that for me is always your concern when you have a guy who's rapid on the wing, stepping up to, Super Rugby, stepping up to Test match, sorry. And for him to go one-on-one with Talao and, come off very well, I thought was only doing good things.
Yeah, if you don't believe me, watch the first 10, 15 minutes. AJ Lamb a couple of times running straight at him, expecting him to go down, and ball and all, like, he stood up, and it was great. And Declan Meredith, 25-year-old, and he's got better every week, hasn't he? And Alan could have played last week. He was fit. He just wasn't brought across for it. Just going, management-wise, we'll give you another week. But now there's the competition for spots. If Noah does go overseas, which I think is the expectation that he will, that, you've got a Meredith. And if you need to look over, like, elsewhere in Australian rugby to get another experienced guy to come in, sure. But Meredith has been at the Brumbies for a few years. He's a 15 as well. His kicking game. Like, Matt, have you seen a better kicker for touch than Declan Meredith in the last couple of weeks? Like, he's peeling off 40, 50 metres on all his kicks. And there was one kick that went over Bowden Barrett's head, which was almost a banana off the right. That kind of
so close,
22. How much of a difference can it be when you have someone who can relieve pressure from inside your half with a big kick, whether or not it be from a penalty for a clear kick?
Yeah, it's very Tom Banks like, isn't it? That the amount of times he would go for corner and they would drive over and maul and fair play. The maul isn't kind of what it used to be for the Brumbies at the moment. But Meredith, those things do make they make an impact, and they're often an overlooked thing. I don't know if it's just because of our rugby league influence where we just, get the ball out, don't miss touch, and then, get on with it. But you change the call. You'll have a call going into a kick for touch, and then depending where the ball goes, you often change it. So it has a very visible kind of impact on the field at the time. But yeah, he's just well coached, and something that you probably expect from a Stephen Larkham coach team is that his decision making is very good. And I dare say he was probably behind, he probably would have been third string heading into the season, but had a really good preseason, had an awesome couple trials, really forced his way, into that kind of 23, and then he's taking his chances, and no doubt they'll be probably putting the contract in front of him, trying to sign him up for a couple more years.
Well, they've done the investment now. It's now let's get something out of him. Good thing to highlight Larkham there in the coaching. It was interesting hearing him post game. He did look a bit glassy-eyed, and he was asked, what we said there, and he said, "Look, I needed a moment. I had to go to the bathroom and have myself a moment to regather my composure." And I probably did say a couple of things that I usually wouldn't, and it was a bit rare. I imagine that the Stephen Larkham that you knew 10 years ago, probably a bit different now. He would have been pretty quiet and tactically shrewd back then, but it does seem like he's added a lot more layers and levels to his coaching game. My understanding at the moment is that Dan McKellar and Stephen Larkham aren't considered a top tier candidate for the next Wallabies head coaching role. I've been told it's likely Les Kiss or an overseas candidate. I know we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, thinking, okay, well, let's go through it and what are some of the pros and cons. But a Les Kiss up against a Leon McDonald, who's a coaching consultant at the Force, what kind of role really is that? Doesn't seem long-term to me. And it seems like there was a desire to get him into Aussie rugby, perhaps a greater thing. I've heard Stuart Lancaster's name just mentioned recently as well. But to me, it does seem like Les Kiss is the guy that RA are thinking very closely about. And as I said at the top, it looks like an announcement will be made in the next 2 weeks, and inside that, well and truly. What do you think? Kiss and the two guys, I think it's a bit of an oversight perhaps. Like Larkham, 10 years of coaching, he's been a head coach for a lot of it, and you can see the improvements that he's made throughout his tenure. I'm sure he would have done a good job as an assistant in 2015, but I am surprised that I don't think he's closer than people perhaps think he should be.
Yeah, with this kind of stuff, you just want to see, for me, I just want to see logic to it. And there's clearly, for me, Steve's the only guy who's kind of been to a semi-final in recent times out of these coaches. And Dan's obviously been away. I think he won the Super Rugby AU in the past, but I'd be pretty filthy if I was him, because it seems like, like I said, he's got to the semi-final multiple times, lost against the Blues over there, and then has shown, has beaten the Blues for the first time in 12 years. There's a fair argument to make that there's a logical progression there. I still think I personally would like a head coach who's won a couple tournaments, but if we're going to go with an Aussie, a local or whatever, Les, he's obviously got a lot of rats on him, but is it the shiny toy, the new shiny toy? I'm assuming that he's come with some really good kind of recommendations, probably from Joe, and, they probably know a lot more that we don't. But yeah, just looking from afar and obviously not being as close to it, I think Steve's got, fair enough reason to be pretty filthy at that.
I reckon that Steve Larkham, he looks, the forward thinking is the thing I like about him. I loved the bench makeup of the weekend, the halftime, how they responded. I loved what they did in the round one. Even though they didn't win in round two against the Force, I think the logic there behind keeping some of your better players, more experienced international, was behind to inject them into a week two. I thought that was so sound, and took a bit of courage to do that, I reckon, as well. And then to go there and win in Fiji was a big one. They played some great rugby against the Chiefs, despite just going down a week earlier. But they're 2-2 now. They're well and truly in the races from a competition perspective as well. They're sixth at the moment. They're only 5 points adrift of the Chiefs in first, who dropped a game against Fiji. And it was an amazing round of rugby full stop, with Moana Pacifica beating the Hurricanes, with the Fijians beating the Chiefs as well. So an amazing round of rugby, but it is the big kind of elephant in the room at the moment. Who's going to be the next Wallabies coach? So, watch this space in the next 10 to 12 days. I would say that we're going to find out really more about that. And I think there's already been some inquiries with the Reds around, okay, if it is Les Kiss, what are our options, and ensuring them that they'll come there with some ideas as well. So
I do. Sorry, I will jump in just quickly, but I do think that maybe in and around the environments is that criticism of Steve has been his organisation, from a whole, or lack of, and I think I wonder if they're old misgivings that maybe has been hard to shake. He's very much grown up as a coach in front of us. I was lucky enough to be there when he just started at the Brumbies, come down from Japan, and I do wonder if guys like you Phil Waugh and these guys who played with him, who maybe understood him and saw how he might come across as disorganized or whatever, but he's clearly always had a strategy for things, and I do wonder if that managing up thing hasn't maybe been as good as it could have been. I don't know. I don't know what the question. I don't know. What I'm really saying here, but I do wonder if that's been hard to shake.
Yeah, I reckon it probably has, because I just thought about it the other day. He was head coach before he was really even an assistant. Second year coming in, straight off the back of Jake White. He was a guy that was very much learning on the run, and you've got to say it's probably credit to him that he's managed to stick it out. And I remember from a conversation a long while ago with him, he said that he went to Munster and realised, I'm taking my family here. I've got to take this very seriously now. So I think there's probably some truth to that. I wonder if yes, I think you're probably right. The Larkham of 10 years ago, it's very different to the one now. So we'll see. And the year as it goes on, we'll probably continue to tell some more stories around has Rugby Australia got the right person? And it's, in some ways, I go, we're a month into the season. Should we just now hold off a few months to allow this season to progress? But at the same time, it does look like they've made the decision that we'll get this out of the way and allow the coaches to grow, to develop, and to be having all their concentration on the Super Rugby season at large. Hey, Matt, big week ahead, some big clashes, probably none bigger from an Australian perspective anyway than the Reds and the Tars on Saturday night. But the Brumbies and Fiji Friday, before that, the Highlanders and Hurricanes, the Chiefs and Blues on Saturday, and the Crusaders and the Force. And it's a big opportunity for the Force to respond. I know we didn't speak at length about them, but that's going to be a difficult challenge up against the Crusaders on Saturday afternoon. So big round of Super Rugby, big round of the Six Nations, the decider, France's Six Nations to lose. They've really only got to beat Scotland, and they'll come away with the title there. But if they do slip up, both England and Ireland, serious chances. Ireland's at Italy. They need a bonus point at the very least, you'd think. And England's against Wales in Cardiff. So a lot going on. Super W is up and running, a couple of weeks out from the Hong Kong Sevens as well. So lots to look forward to now and this week and the weeks to come. Hey, Matt, good to chew the fat, good to talk rugby and code once again. And we'll do it all again in a week's time.
Can't wait.